Today, we're going to be speaking with astronaut Joe Kerwin, discussing his newly released novel, Finding Eden, and guest interviewer Burke Allen of Allen Media Strategies. Thank you both for joining us, and Burke, take it away.
Well, hey there. Thank you so much for being a part of our very special simulcast of the Big Time Talker podcast and Zoom into books, video, and audio. And thanks to our show sponsor, SpeakerMatch.com. They are the world's largest online virtual speakers bureau. If you're a platform speaker, you like to go out and do talks, or maybe you're a meeting planner and you need a great speaker, check out SpeakerMatch.com. We have brand new episodes of the Big Time Talker podcast every Tuesday, and you can download those and subscribe at Spotify, Apple, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast entertainment. It's not often that you get to speak with a legend, but our guest today is just that. Joseph Peter Kerwin is not only a physician, he is the first ever American physician to go into space. He's a former NASA astronaut, served as the science pilot for Skylab 2 back in 1973. First physician, I believe, as well, to ever be selected for astronaut training, and the first doc to enter space. His new book is called Finding Eden, and it's a prehistorical novel. I want to find out what that's all about. It's published by our friends at Headline Books. Joe, nice to talk with you.
Nice to be here. Great to talk to you and to try and talk about the book and whatever else you want to talk about.
Well, let's start way back at the very beginning. You're a Chicago kid, and you were born before there was a space program. So at what point did you get interested in the possibilities of space? How did that even come onto your radar?
Well, I was, raised in Chicago, Catholic grade school, high school. I went to Holy Cross College in Massachusetts, went back to medical school at Northwestern in Chicago. And I graduated from there in 1957. And it was in that year that the Russians flew Sputnik, the first satellite. So this thing was developing behind me. I had been an ardent science fiction reader, but so I was very interested, but I never thought I'd have anything to do with it. I went into internship, and near the end of internship, I got a letter saying, "Hello, this is the United States Navy. You have been drafted in by the doctor's draft, and we'll spend 2 years in the Navy." So I immediately went and asked what they had by way of tours. And one of the things was a seat in the flight surgeon training class down in Pensacola. You get to be a flight surgeon. You get maybe 20 hours or so of backseat time in an airplane, and then you go off and treat pilots and investigate accidents and do all that kind of stuff. I did that. I was assigned to the Marines. I loved them. We made a tour on the USS Essex. I fell in love with the people and the profession. I asked for flight training. The Navy said no. I asked again. They said, well, okay. And so in 1962, I got my Navy wings, went back to being a flight surgeon in Florida, met a couple of guys who were applying to the astronaut program, came to me to help with the medical information. Jim Law and then Alan Bean. And they were both selected, so I had people I knew in the program. And in 1964, much to my surprise, NASA decided to select scientist astronauts. They didn't quite know what to do with them, but the science community wanted them, so they selected some, and I was selected. I was, a doctor, an MD, which was was on their list. I had 2,000 hours in Navy flight time, and I could pass the physical. I was a little bit worried about that right eye, but of course I'd been given pilots exams for 7 years by that time, and I had the eye chart memorized. So I got through.
Comes out.
DEFPOTEC. That's the 2020 line. I still remember it.
That's great.
So I got into the program and had a wonderful time for the next 10 years, just helping any way I could to get these guys to the moon and learning the program myself. I went to meetings. I tested anything that needed to be tested. They finally, they gave me the spacesuit testing job, and I did that. I got to be on the test crew for the command module that was going to go to the moon, the Block 1, which was a terrible thing. And then the Block 2, we tested that 6 months before the first flight, and it was a beautiful spacecraft. So, here I am, and I'm a Capcom on Apollo 13, communicating with the crew on that mission, which failed to land on the moon, but which, through the efforts of mission control, we got them back. And then I got my own seat in Skylab. And we went up, spent a month on that prototype space station, which was the inside of the fuel tank of a Saturn rocket upper stage.
Wow.
And we did a spacewalk to free up a solar panel for the needed power, Pete Conrad and I, and spent a month up there floating, looking down at the Earth and up at the stars, and having the time of my life.
It's hard for us mere mortals to even comprehend what that must be like. And you mentioned that the beginning of this, or a lot of the beginning of this, started when you met Jim Lovell. And of course, we all know the story now of Apollo 13 because of that. What I thought was a fantastic movie, with Tom Hanks playing Lovell. And I wonder, when you watch movies about the space program in particular, what you think, Joe, Hollywood gets right and what they get wrong.
What the Apollo 13 movie?
Yeah, well, the Apollo 13 movie or movies in general, what do they get right about the space program, and what do they get wrong?
Yeah, I'll talk about the Apollo 13 movie because it's the one I know the best, having seen it 2 or 3 times.
And live the story.
And sort of lived the story, yes. And they did a good job. They threw a little romance and some of that stuff in that didn't really fit. But on the mission, they did an excellent job, and told the story in a proper dramatic fashion. I think it was fine. I don't know how many other movies there are out there which attempt to be factual, but Apollo 13, although it was a fictional movie, did an excellent job.
Were you, you said you were the communications officer for that. What was the feeling in mission control when things just kept going wrong?
Well, I went to bed the evening of about the 4th day out, where they were approaching the moon. Everything was fine, and I had an early return time, so I got up and left the living room where the television was on, and as I left, I heard something about there's a problem, but I didn't pay any attention. I went to sleep. At midnight, I was called by the Capcom who was on duty, Vance Brand, and he said, "Joe, the lunar mission is over. We've had an explosion." And I said, "I'll be right out." And
Sure.
So I missed the first few desperate hours when all the red lights were going on, when the puff of steam or something was seen by Jim Lovell out the window. And it was a set of characteristics and signals that nobody had ever seen before, despite all their training. And it took them about an hour back and forth to finally figure out, we're losing power in the command module. Something has happened in the service module. We had better power up the LEM right now and power down the command module and save that battery power for hopefully a re-entry if we can get there. And from that point on, all this team of guys just went minute by minute and hour by hour. This is a problem, fix it. This is a problem, live with it. We're going to turn off the main computer in the lunar module to save power. You can't do that. They have it out right there in front of everybody and decide that, well, we can't do it, but we're going to do it because we have to do it.
Right.
And all the things that happened, they made the burn to not land on the moon, but go around. They made the next burn to get back a day early. And that was a big decision to make. They could have made one to get back 2 days early, but if anything had gone wrong with that burn, they would have lost the crew. So they said, we think we can power down enough to get home on time. If we get home 1 day early, they did it. And then they powered everything down. I remember sitting in the Capcom seat with the headset on, listening to noise because the main communications had been turned off. The backup comm was on, and if the spacecraft wanted to talk to us, they'd say, Houston, this is 13, and we'd, tell them to power up and converse and then turn it off again.
Yeah.
Solved all the problems on all the way home, got to the point where they'd separated from the service module, separated from the lunar module, got the attitude adjusted, ready to go, and entered the atmosphere in a jovial mood. Everybody was happy that we got there. And then the time came for communication to resume. And I said, 13, Houston, over. No reply. Wait 30 seconds. Apollo 13, Houston. No reply. And all of a sudden, I noticed that mission control was totally quiet. Everybody was looking straight ahead. And I'm sure they were all saying, what did I do wrong? Did we screw up? What's going to happen? And then all of a sudden we heard, okay, Joe. And they were fine, and we partied, and but it was that kind of that thing. Every day you just kept on doing what you needed to do and hoped that nothing else would happen. I still have a coffee cup around here somewhere that says failure is not an option. Gene Kranz's favorite speech.
Astronaut Joe Kerwin, who was a part of Apollo 13, and his new book is Finding Eden. We're going to talk a lot about this book, and in this book, it deals with your faith. And I think about the story that you just told, and those guys were your friends. To America, there are astronauts. Jim Lovell was your pal. You knew all of these guys really well. And I don't want you to talk about anything that you're not comfortable with, Joe, but I have to ask you, did you throw a couple up to the big man upstairs and say a prayer that your friends would come home?
Every day. Absolutely. Every day I prayed. A lot of us did. Yes. And after my flight, the occasional reporter would say, well, you've been up to space and you've seen it. Has it changed your opinion about God, about the faith or anything like that? And I would be able to say no. I always knew it was wonderful, and now I've just had an opportunity to see it. But again, should I start talking about the book now?
I love where you're going with this.
Making the connection.
Well, there is a great connection there to your faith, and that's one of the things that fascinated me, and one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on to talk about sort of the juxtaposition of your training as a physician, your time as a pilot. You were a captain in the Navy, is that right? You rose to captain?
That's right.
And all those hours that you put in, and then the science and your faith, and you mentioned Skylab, though. I do want to ask you a little bit about that, and whether that brought you in your mind closer to God, because you got a view of our planet that few of us will ever see.
This is true. Now, we had problems on Skylab, but we didn't have any life-threatening problems. Our problem was not at all like Jim Lovell's.
Right.
We had a spacecraft that had lost its heat shield during launch, tearing away one of the two big solar panels, strapping the other one down, and exposing the laboratory to high temperatures. So we had the problem of getting a canopy put out on the sunny side to cool the temperatures down.
Sure.
And then the ground was trying to figure out how we could get to a place that no one ever thought we'd have to get to. No handrails, no foot rails, no nothing. Get out there with some hardware and pull up that solar panel. And the 14th day, Pete and I went out and managed to get it done. So that was a great moment, you know.
Oh, sure.
A great triumphant moment. After that, we just settled down, did our experiments, and long about day 23, somebody said, we were at the supper table, it's been day 23 forever up here. We're getting bored. Time to go home.
With all that training as a pilot, and you know, you're just a few years after Korea, and then seeing what happened with the Apollo 13 and you having the issues on Skylab. I mean, do you know in the back of your mind the whole time, this is a really dangerous thing? We're in an uncharted territory here. Or do you suppress that and put it out of your mind? Where does fear and humanity play into a guy's psyche?
Well, launch is a little exciting in that way, because if something's going to go wrong, there's a good chance it might be during the launch. That's what happened, of course, to the STS.
Right.
Which number it was, the 1986 tragedy, Challenger.
Challenger, right.
It happened during the launch.
I think that may be the understatement of the century when you say, you know, launch can be, you know, a little scary. I mean, you're strapped to a rocket. And that first stage, you're just riding, you know. You could separate in an emergency and come home, but you're just riding that thing. But when the second stage comes on, it's nice and quiet, things are going good, and the sense of a potential problem, I didn't say fear, because really, you know, we've been so much inured by takeoffs and landings, including carrier landings in naval aviation. Right, right.
You just do it, and you figure you're pretty well trained, and you know your emergency procedures. Now go do it.
Hey, as a physician, as we talk about space, you know, we have these astronauts that are stranded now for an extended period of time on the ISS, and there was a lot of talk, as I'm sure you followed, you know, having worked in that industry, as what's going to bring them back. What's the piece of hardware that's best to bring them back? First of all, as a physician, I'd love to know, will this extended time in space affect them physiologically? Will there be things that will happen, I don't know, to their bone density, to anything? Will they have any medical repercussions?
Well, yes, things will happen to them. Whether the things will be permanent or difficult or not depends. We have really very little experience with flights of a year. These guys are going to be up there close to a year.
Right.
We do have some, and we've had some problems with vision based on long periods of upper body pressure within the circulatory system. You know, your fluids get rearranged in weightlessness. There is a bone demineralization possibility, although the exercise program is pretty good, and I don't think that will reach levels. And then you're just exposed to incidents of disease that might be serious and might require you to be brought home soon. That has not happened in spaceflight, to my knowledge, ever. We've selected healthy people, and they've stayed healthy through their flights, including the guys who stayed up on station for a year.
Right.
So I think they'll be okay. Yes, they are taking on some additional risk, and God bless them for it. Yeah.
Looking at it from the inside outside, you have more of an inside track than most of us do, but yet you're not in there day to day. I know, Joe, you spent some time after, you know, the Navy and NASA. You worked in the private sector for Lockheed. In your opinion, did NASA make the right call on having them stay, and how to get them home?
In my opinion, NASA made the conservative call, the safe call that said, we're not going to take any chances whatsoever with that Boeing spacecraft, and with the possibility that it might not be controllable in attitude after separation. Boeing swears that it would have. I think they're probably right. And if you look at it from the standpoint of an Apollo 13-like problem, where the problem is immediate and you've got to solve it, they had ways to solve their problems and get down. But this wasn't that kind of problem. It was sitting there. There was an alternate way to get the guys home.
Right.
And they chose the super safe way, and will obviously allow Boeing to do the separation, reentry, and landing remotely without any people on the spacecraft, and work it that way. It was conservative, but reasonable. And I thought, I listened to the press conference, and I thought they did a good job of explaining it.
Do you have any kind of gauge as to how different the living conditions are in the International Space Station in 2024 than it was for you in Skylab 50 years ago?
In some ways, it's not any better. They're at normal atmospheric sea level pressure. We were at a third of an atmosphere, 70% oxygen, and it was fine. I think our food's is probably as good as theirs was. We didn't get enough of it, though. That was the problem. Our exercise equipment was much more primitive than theirs, but Skylab taught them two things. You can go long duration in space if you eat enough and if you exercise enough. And on the space station, they have worked that out and done a good job. They have a lot of space to wander around in. They have the Russian segment to go. I think they go once a week for dinner or something like that. The rest of the time, they're pretty separate, which surprises me.
That's interesting. It's not like there are a lot of people up there. You want somebody different to talk to.
Yeah, right. But so it's a fairly busy laboratory. They get some time off. They have a wonderful cupola where they can look at the Earth, and looking at the Earth is what's going to sell spaceflight to tourists. The time will come when it'll be safe to go fly for 2 weeks in a commercial space station and look at the Earth.
Just amazing to think about. Joe Kerwin is our guest today, retired NASA astronaut, physician, the first American doctor in space, and spent some time aboard Skylab. You co-wrote a book once before that was about Skylab. You wrote it with Owen Garriott, but this new book, Finding Eden, this is a novel. This is you being creative and doing a look back. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Why don't you describe? Tell me what Finding Eden is all about.
Okay. Finding Eden, writing that book started with looking back on my Christian upbringing and noting that in the modern world, as we slipped from the 60s down to the 10s and 20s, things are changing. Obviously, evolution is considered to be true, and it may be true. But just as obviously, religious faith is diminishing in importance and has enemies even in our society, because it forbids people to do things that they want to do. Okay.
Sure.
And it makes you think back, particularly thinking about evolution, on the only story we know about that's written down on the origin of the human race, and that's the book of Genesis in the Bible.
Right.
And the book of Genesis, I believe it, but I think it's incomplete. There's, why did God allow Adam and Eve to be alone with the devil and to have him sweet talk them into disobeying something God had told them to do? That's number one. And number two, why were the results of that so horrible? and that it disabled us morally, all of us, the humans, from there on, and made us so susceptible to evil. And thinking about that, reading C.S. Lewis and others who have thought about it and written about it, I said, wouldn't it be fun to write a novel and place people in the earth sometime after Eden, maybe 1,000 years after, where their memories are beginning to fade and they have no written language. If they want to know anything about the past, they have to remember it. If they want to go any place, they have to walk. They haven't got metal. It's a Stone Age civilization, but it consists of people whose ancestors talked to God, who obviously have language, who obviously understood the moral law. And so how are they living and what are they thinking now? And in that context, can we write a story that's exciting and talks about the Adam and Eve problem? And so I invented, a family, a tribe of people who live halfway between the Euphrates River and the Mediterranean, 1,000 years after Adam and Eve, about 8,000 BC. And I had to figure out how they lived, how they got food, what they clothed themselves in, and then set them in a society where there were scattered communities, tribes, if you will, of human beings on the Mediterranean coast and then east of it. I had them get into trouble with their most friendly neighborhood tribe. And I also had the teller in the story, the man whose job was to remember, okay, come up with a piece of what looked like glass that had symbols on it that had been in their possession as far as they knew from Adam and Eve, from the very first. And they couldn't understand it. And he said, I want to get a group of young people together and go back and try to find the Garden of Eden and try to find the people who lived there in those days and still perhaps do. And maybe we can sort that out. So we got two storylines going. The beginning of this expedition back to find Eden and the other tribe attacking my people, killing some of them, capturing the rest, and walking them to a place east of the river where there's an old, where there is in fact an old ruin, okay, and say, we are building a temple to the sun god and you're going to help us to do all the rough work and we don't know what will happen if that. So we've got slaves to rescue and we have a stone to decipher and a garden to find. And and the story is how those things came out and how they discovered their past through their expedition.
So it's an interesting concept, and I wonder where it came from. At what point, we all know the story of Adam and Eve, whether you're a church kid or not a church kid, that story permeates the culture. The rest of this that you came up with, I mean, you obviously made pains, took a lot of time to make this an interesting page turner of a story.
Oh yeah.
Where did it come from? Where in that Joe Kerwin head did all this come from?
Well, the bones of the story were the problem of evil, and a lot of reading and a lot of thinking and a lot of plotting that said this could have happened, that could have happened. Let's make some decisions that allow me to write about it. Let's place the time and let's place the location. Let's not worry about physical evolution. It may have happened, it may not have happened, but here comes a pair of humans who are awakened by God and taught language and taught right from wrong and ready to go out into the world when this evil thing happens. And so they do, and they have children and children's children, and the rise and spread of humanity takes place. And the people 1,000 years down, what do they know? remember very much, but they find out. And in the finding out, they have these adventures. And hopefully I've built characters that people will like and love, and some that they won't. and that it's a good novel and a good story in that way. And also a thinking story about what really happened at Eden, and what kind of battle God and the devil already were fighting in time and in eternity when we started our journey.
Astronaut, physician, and now author Joe Kerwin. His new book is Finding Eden. It's available from Headline Books and Amazon.com, wherever books are sold. Well, Joe, was it an intentional thing for you to not weigh into that debate about evolution? Was that, or was that something you toyed with dealing with in this book?
It was an intentional thing. I think it's unproven. On the other hand, it is certainly possible and maybe probable. It's controversial, and there is a tendency to say, if evolution is true, then God doesn't exist, and vice versa. This is dumb, okay? And let's not adopt that dumb policy. Let's let evolution be or not be in the past, in these people's past, in Adam and Eve's past, and let's talk about when they became human, what their problems were and how they solved them.
So in your mind, and I would agree with you, it doesn't have to be an either or kind of question.
Absolutely not.
When you were in space on Skylab and you saw the Earth and you saw space, was that a religious moment for you, or were you so wrapped up and focused in your work that not so much? I wonder if you could sort of take me back there and peel that onion a little bit.
Well, not so much, because my expectations were met. They were not defied in any way. I thought that God created a universe that was strange and wonderful, and I was going to get a chance to look at it from outside the planet. And I did. And I saw the Earth. I'm looking for your house in Chicago or for Lake Michigan or the airport is a wonderful thing. You're coming up there, at a very high rate of speed, like 18,000 miles an hour. You're 250 miles up. It may be cloudy, but today maybe it'll be clear. Maybe I'll find home.
Wow.
And then, to take another example, you're flying. You have to stay up late if you want to see the Eastern Hemisphere in daylight, because that's just how the orbits worked out. So one evening late, we rolled over southern Turkey, and I had this view in full daylight of the valley of the Tigris and Euphrates River. Here's the border of the Mediterranean. There's Israel and the Holy Land, and over the mountains over on the other side. This is the cradle of civilization, and I am looking down at it. I took a picture. It's wonderful. That sort of experience, you can't really call it a religious experience, but it conforms to my idea of God.
Finding Eden is the book. Astronaut and author Joe Kerwin is our guest today. By the way, we should mention, and I just found this out a couple of days ago,
Yeah.
Joe Kerwin this year inducted as a full-fledged member of the Irish American Hall of Fame. Well done, sir.
Thank you. That was a total surprise. I had no idea until they called and said, "This is what we've done." But I think that would please my parents, especially my dad, who's a good old Irishman, more than flying in space,
I don't know about that, but you knew your dad, so
Yeah. It was good for me and my whole Irish American family.
As a physician, were you a family practice physician? What did you do?
Remember, I got sucked into the Navy, and as
Pretty early.
surgeon, yes, your medical stuff was treating the sailors, especially the pilots, but also the dependents, the wives and kids. So that was a family practice.
Did your religious upbringing as a Irish Catholic kid from Chicago, did that have any bearing on the way you practice medicine and folks you might see at end of life or
Well,
any of that?
in those days, it was quite possible to be a physician and not get into any moral or ethical bad places with the practice of medicine. Today, that's much less true with the abortion thing going on.
Right.
And the ability of hospitals to force Catholics to assist in the performance of abortions, whether they want to or not. That was not the case at all in my practice. I had some arguments, I remember, with a couple of residents about the existence of God and stuff like that, but it didn't affect practice at all.
Hey, I'm going to throw something out at you here, only because I'm traveling right now. I'm in a hotel room in Las Vegas. We have a whole box of Finding Eden in my office in DC. Do you happen to have a copy of the book there with you anywhere nearby?
Right here.
Can you hold that up to your camera?
You bet.
The cover, I think, is just beautiful. That's Finding Eden. That's the brand new prehistorical novel from Joe Kerwin. Did you coin that phrase, prehistorical novel?
Yes,
I've
I
never
did.
heard that.
I
love
didn't
that.
do the cover. However, they asked me what sort of thing, what kind of cover I wanted. And there's a scene in the book where Teller, this is the guy who brought the young folks all the way and found the garden. I mean, this was spectacular. And he and Memo, who was the rememberer of the little group of people who will live in Eden, are in the garden themselves, right where Adam and Eve must have sat, 10,000 years before. And no, for them, about 1,000 years before. And talking about it, what it's like. So it's a great cover. I think they did a really good job of conjuring that peaceful garden.
Hats off to the gang at Headline Books, the publisher of the new book, brand new book, just released from astronaut Joe Kerwin. It's called Finding Eden. You can pick it up at headlinebooks.com, amazon.com, or wherever books are sold. As a pilot in the Navy, were there times when you were scared? Were there times when you prayed? I would imagine, anytime that you fly an airplane, to a certain extent, you're putting your life into God's hands. Sure, you have training, but things can go wrong. What was your mindset like as a young guy doing that?
I think the most scared I ever got was flying home at night from Cape Kennedy in my T-38, and the weather in Houston closed in a couple of hours earlier than forecast. And I found myself descending into the Houston area with not enough fuel remaining to go someplace else. And I had to land that airplane someplace, and the weather was down to like 200 feet ceiling and a quarter-mile visibility. I tried it at Ellington and couldn't find the runway. Popped over to Hobby, the civilian airport a few miles away, and they had an ILS system. And I got to 200 feet, couldn't see anything. I just kept on going and finally saw the runway lights, about 50 feet above me. Got it down. I didn't know how far down the runway I had gone, so I shut the engines down, stopped on the runway, and used the backup radio to call the tower and tell him what I did. And he said, "It's okay, we just closed the field."
Oh, man.
That was a scary landing. And I said to myself, maybe I shouldn't have been here at all. Maybe I should have gone to an alternate with that weather forecast.
But you got it down. So, was there a time in your life when you stepped away from God?
From flying?
Oh no, from your religious background at all? You
No.
talked about growing up as an Irish Catholic.
Never. I was lucky enough to marry a girl who was also Catholic, and she was a better person than I am, and I'm looking forward to our reunion in a few years. No, I never stepped away from my faith. I'm not saying I never sinned now, but I remained a faithful Catholic.
You guys had three daughters,
Yes.
and I wonder, you know, to the rest of us, Joe, and I don't want your head to get so big that it doesn't fit onto the computer screen here.
Yeah.
But
right.
you know, you're kind of a big deal. You're a NASA astronaut. You're at Skylab. You were part of the whole Apollo 13 mission, which is now legendary. But when you were at home with Shirley or with the girls when they were coming up, were you a big deal at home?
No, and that was a good thing. The girls went to school in the local area, and all the kids had parents who were in NASA one way or the other. It was no big deal whatsoever. My wife was in a little different position, but you know, as an astronaut wife, and they had a group, and we socialized with those people some. But she used to call me Wiffa. She'd say,
Wiffa,
"Lisa,
what is
take
that?"
out the garbage, will you?" Wiffa
Wiffa.
stands for world famous astronaut. So they had a very proper attitude toward that. And actually, when you think about it, being an astronaut at that time was a lot like being a successful football player or baseball player, an athletic star. 5 years or 10 years later, it's who? You know? Who's the guy who wrote The Right Stuff?
Oh, what a great movie. What a great book. Yeah.
It was a great book. And at the very end of the book, he makes that very point about these famous astronauts, about, first of all, the scene when John Glenn did his march, his parade down Fifth Avenue in New York, and the cops were crying. They were crying over him and saying, "Oh God, it's wonderful." And then 10 years later, who was it that did that? It all goes away.
It's all relative. Hey, one more question about the book. The book is Finding Eden, by the way. It's a brand new prehistorical novel from astronaut Joe Kerwin. If you're not particularly religious, in your opinion, is there still something there? I know what I think. I think it's a great read, irregardless. I think it's just a fun
I
book.
do too. I don't make up, you know, these guys who lived 1,000 years after Adam and Eve, were they particularly religious? They hadn't developed priests yet. They hadn't developed a hard religious doctrine.
Right.
All that stuff was in the future. They were struggling to understand right from wrong, and to get along with others. So I think anybody can read it and take a stance on it or enjoy it.
And by the way, I just got a note. That was Tom Wolfe, of course, who wrote The Right Stuff.
Tom Wolfe, that's right. Thank you.
And now you have joined the ranks of Tom Wolfe as an author. Congratulations.
I'm a mere apprentice to Tom Wolfe. He was a
The brand new book is Finding Eden, and astronaut Joe Kerwin is still a Texas guy after making Houston home. He's hung around in the Texas area. Afterwards, very successful post NASA career. By the way, do you still fly airplanes?
What?
Do you still fly airplanes?
No, gave up flying airplanes at least 25 years ago. You get to the point where you don't get enough time in the cockpit to be safe, and that's when it's time to hang it up. I have a son-in-law, my daughter Christina's husband, Joe Doherty. He's a good pilot. He's a commercial pilot, not for an airline, but for a private flying group. He's a better pilot than I ever was. I have flown with him a few times. He's allowed me to do the stick and throttle and stuff like that. But my vision, my memory, my grasp are not good enough now to make me safe as a pilot.
Fair enough. Well, you seem very sharp to me. And look, it's been a real honor to have this conversation with you. Thank you for making time. Best of luck with a book.
Thank you very much. I want to say one more thing. We've been talking about Christianity. And
Yes,
I
sir.
got to quote my friend Gilbert K. Chesterton, who said, I believe in Christianity the way I believe in the sunrise, because I see it, and because by it, I see everything else.
I love that. We'll leave it there. That's astronaut, physician, and now author Joe Kerwin. The book is Finding Eden. It's available from our friends at Headline Books, at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, wherever great books are sold. Joe, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, sir, very much.
We have new episodes of our Big Time Talker podcast available every Tuesday for our friends at Headline Books and Zoom into Books. I'm Burke Allen, broadcasting live today from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, go out and make it a great day. Bye, everybody.